Hello friends, glad to have you here. My name is Yash from Front of the Table, and today I'm very excited to be talking about Splendor Duel and why it'll be fun at your table. Splendor Duel is a tabletop set collection game where you're collecting gems. This game is designed by Marc and Bruno Cathala, and this copy I have is published by Space Cowboys. In this game, you collect gems of various kinds, which then lets you collect even more gems. And at some point, you'll have enough points to win. But there's 3 ways to win in this game. I'm going to be doing this in 3 parts. I'll give you a brief overview of the game and the rules, just enough for you to understand what I'm talking about, but not too much detail that we get bogged down by it. I'll provide a link on screen and in the description below to someone who goes over it in way more detail than me. The second thing I'll do is I'll talk about the fun factor. So why is this game fun? Who is it fun for? And why it'll be fun at your table. And the last thing I'll talk about is the review. I review games differently. I use a radial bar chart to do so, and I stray away from a single numerical score because I think games deserve more than that. So make sure to stick around for that. Splendor Duel is a competitive game. You're trying to win in one of 3 ways by collecting gems. And some of these gems look like that. You can actually collect these gems in one of 2 ways though. The first way is an indirect way. The game actually has a game board with jewels on it. I'll show you what that looks like. And you actually take these gems off of the game board like that. The second way you can collect these gems is by getting these cards that I showed you earlier. So to do that, to get some of these gems, you have to use the gems that you've taken off the board to buy them. For example, to buy this one, you need 2 sapphires, 6 emeralds, and 2 rubies. Once you buy them though, this card is permanently part of your gem collection. So you always have 1 emerald as buying power moving forward. So the next time you need 2 emeralds, you'll only have to take 1 off this board. The game actually calls these cards jewel cards. I've been calling them gems, but maybe jewels is more appropriate. I should have called them jewels from the start, to be honest. These are the 3 ways to win that I mentioned before. You have to be the first to reach one of these victory conditions. This victory condition here is saying that you need to collect 20 points or more to end the game and win. The way that works, I'll show you one of these jewel cards that I showed you before. If you permanently add this to your collection, you manage to buy it, this card will give you 4 points. The second thing you can do is collect more than 10 points worth in 1 jewel. Here's what that looks like. For example, if I did that, this is 4 points, and this card here is actually a wild jewel, so it can actually represent any jewel. So here I add it to a jewel stack that I already have, because when you get cards that are of the same type, you stack them like this, and when I stack it on top of my emerald stack, this is treated as an emerald. And because that's the case, I have now 7 points worth of emerald. You'll notice there's some symbols on here. This one is just saying that this is a wild card. And this one is actually saying, when you buy this card, you get to take another turn immediately. So some of the cards have little bonuses like that, so watch out for those. And the last way to win. If you collect 10 or more crowns, you also win the game. Here's what that looks like. Here's a card with 3 points. It's a ruby, but it also has crowns on it. So this gives you 2 crowns. If you collect a whole bunch of these and they add up to 10 or more, you also win. The crowns are really interesting because if you're the first person to get 3 crowns, you get your choice of one of these royals. So if you take one of these cards and add it to your collection, you get 3 points. This is a very simple royal here. Here's another royal that gives you 2 points and you get to take your turn again. This royal here, you get 2 points and you get to steal a jewel from your opponent. So you go back and forth, taking turns, collecting jewels, which then you use to buy more jewels, which then gets you even more jewels, and it just snowballs from there. And you keep doing that till one of you reaches one of the 3 victory conditions. Let me talk about the turn in a little more detail. On your turn, you can do some optional things, and then you have to do one of 3 required actions. Let me talk about the required actions before I jump back over to the optional actions. The first thing you can do is take jewels off the board. You can take up to 3 jewels in any direction you want, as long as it's uninterrupted. For example, this row here, I can take these 3 jewels. If, for example, this jewel didn't exist, I couldn't take this emerald and these 2 obsidians, because there's a gap here. Likewise, I can take these 3 diagonally, and I can also go like this. But I cannot do something like this, where I take this ruby, this pearl, and this emerald, and change direction from where I started. You also cannot pick up gold this way. Gold is actually a special kind of jewel, because gold is a wild jewel. You can use this to represent any jewel. The second thing you can do on your turn is take 1 gold token from the board, and just 1, and reserve one of these jewel cards off of a market. So there is a market of jewel cards that are visible to both players that people buy from. When you reserve a jewel card off the market, it doesn't go in front of your collection. It's not part of your collection yet. You're just putting it aside to buy later. You can hold up to 3 cards in your reserve. And the last mandatory action is being able to buy a jewel card. You can buy a jewel card off the market or from your reserve if you have any. All you have to do is meet the requirements to buy the jewel card, and you can do so. Remember that you can meet these requirements by collecting these jewels in both ways. Again, the first way is getting these jewels off of the game board. And the second way is buy the cards themselves. For example, to buy for this jewel card, I could spend a ruby and a diamond there. And let's say, for example, I had these 2 cards in my collection, a emerald and a sapphire. Then I meet the requirements, because the requirement says I need 1 diamond, 1 ruby, 1 emerald, and 1 sapphire. When you spend jewels to buy a jewel card, these jewels go back into a drawstring bag to be drawn from later when the game board gets exhausted. These jewels that you have in front of you in your collection, they are permanent. They do not go away. They are there with you for the rest of your game. And those are the 3 mandatory actions. The first thing you can do is take some jewels off of the game board. The second thing you can do is take a gold token and reserve a jewel card to buy at a later time from the market. And the last thing you can do is buy a jewel card outright from the market or from your reserve. When you buy a jewel card, the spent jewels, the little discs, they go back into the game bag. The ones that you have, the jewel cards that you already have that you use to buy something, they are permanent. Now let's talk about those optional things I mentioned that I'd come back to, that you would do before your turn starts and you do one of the 3 things I mentioned. There are 2 optional things you can do in order before your turn begins. And you can do just one of them or both of them. The first thing you can do is take privilege. And privilege is represented by these little scrolls that come with the game. When you spend a privilege, you get to take any jewel off the game board of your choice. And remember, this happens before your mandatory actions. For example, I could spend that to take this jewel right here, and then I could take these 2 using one of the mandatory actions. Note that when you spend privilege, you still can't take gold. How do you get privilege, you're wondering? There are 3 privilege tokens in the game. The second player to begin gets 1 privilege automatically. When your opponent takes 3 jewels of the same kind, you get privilege. When your opponent takes 2 pearls, you get privilege. When your opponent refills the game board, you also get privilege. The refilling of the game board is the second optional action. So if you choose to refill the game board, you have to make sure there's jewels in the bag. And remember, jewels get in the bag when you spend them to get more jewels. And you take all the jewels in this bag and you replenish them in the board. When you do that, your opponent gets one privilege as well. If there's not enough privilege to take from the game, you actually take privilege from your opponent instead. If you manage to purchase this jewel card, then you get one privilege. There are royals that give you privilege as well. Splendor Duel is a very rewarding game. You build up to something over the course of the game, and it just feels good in the end. You start with a measly couple of gems, and you save enough to get your first jewel card, and that first purchase will make a whole bunch of jewel cards in the market seem way easier to get. And it just snowballs from there. There's actually 3 levels of cards in the market, so the market actually forms a pyramid with level 1 cards at the bottom, level 2 cards next, and level 3 cards at the top. And they're progressively more and more expensive, but progressively more and more rewarding. So near the end of the game, you're going to get to that level 3 card, and you're going to be buying some really, really sweet jewel cards. The second thing I really like is that you always have a choice in this game at every point in the game. There's 3 ways to win. And because there's 3 ways to win, you can choose what to do at the start of the game, but you can make a pivot kind of halfway through the game or later in the game if you want to, depending on what your opponent is doing. And the last fun thing I'll mention, but not the least, is privilege. Privilege is a fantastic mechanic because you benefit when your opponent makes a power play. If they take 3 jewels of the same kind, if they take 2 pearls, or if they refill the game board, you get privilege. And using privilege, you can take any jewel off the game board before your turn even begins. The game just feels like a tug of war between 2 minds in the best way possible, in the most relaxing way possible. It's a competitive game, but it feels very relaxing and rewarding. Both of you are going to do really well in the game, and your scores are going to be pretty close together. And one person will have made the right tug right at the very end, and then that's how you win. Mind you, strategy is just as viable in this game. Like, if you have a plan right off the get-go, and you manage to stick to it right to the very end, and you handle all the curveballs thrown from you, or thrown at you from the opponent, and you manage to kind of dodge them, and you win, that feels great too. And this is why this is a duel game in the truest sense. So it's fantastic. If you have 30 minutes to play, if you're looking for something kind of competitive, but a little more relaxing, and you're looking to win with the small margin, you don't want to be completely beat. You want to feel like both of you are working towards something, and you will, and in the end, one person will come out on top. And it's going to feel great either way. Before we press on, if you'd like to see more content like this, please consider liking, subscribing, and of course, throw in a comment down below if you have any thoughts. I rate games a little differently. I want to make sure you get as much information as possible by looking at the rating and quickly knowing whether it's the right fit for you or your game group. And for that, I use a radar graph. Here's my rating of Splendor Duel. Let's start with immersion. I give immersion a 1 here. The theme is a bit loose, it doesn't hold the mechanics together too well, but it captures what makes the game really fun. The name of the game is actually quite apt. Splendor. You're gonna feel splendid when the game ends. Both of you are gonna feel that way. It captures the core fun of the game for me. The rewarding feeling you'll have building towards something great. You can kind of think of it as like purchasing jewels and then selling them to get better jewels. But it kind of falls apart if you look too closely because the jewel cards, they are permanent jewels that you still use to buy other jewels. Does that really make sense? Not sure. I like the chunky weighted discs. That's really fun, I think. I think there was an opportunity here to maybe make these jewels actual little plastic bits, crystals. I know that adds more plastic to games and we need less plastic in the world these days, but it would be interesting to do something like that, I think. Make it feel a little more tactile. I know games have those kinds of pieces. I'm thinking of something like Lost Ruins of Arnak, for example. I love the artwork. I love the privilege tokens. It's all about royalty and jewelry and craftsmanship. It feels like two jewelers who are butting heads and fighting to be favored by the royalty in the kingdom. Or not necessarily butting heads, but more trying to outshine the other or trying to prove who the better jeweler is in a friendly way. Both ways kind of work. Because again, it's a very relaxing yet competitive game. The question really is, who has the better craft? Let's talk about interaction. I give this a 2. It's brilliant for a duel game. There are many duel games out right now at the time of recording, and this duel game is up there for me. It forces you to duel and think about your opponent and play around them, while still holding space for a long-term strategy and kind of playing your own game. The privilege mechanic is the crux of this. Sometimes in the game, you're going to be stuck because there's not going to be enough jewels on the board because your opponent is also taking up to 3 at a time, right? So you're going to probably end up with jewels that you need that you can't pull from the board. When that happens, you're both kind of playing this finger-pointing game, trying to suss out who is going to take the action of refilling the board and giving you privilege. So you're kind of forcing or trying to force their hand so they do it first so you get that privilege. Remember, the game board doesn't refill automatically. One of you has to do it. These jewels that get used to purchase jewel cards, they go in the game bag, the little drawstring bag that comes with the game, and then they stay there until one of you refills the board. One kind of negative thing that can happen in this game is what you call a hate draft. And what this means is your opponent buys a jewel card on purpose just to take it away from you because they know you want it or know you have your eyes on it, even though they don't need it. Now, the game does give you a tool to get around this. That is the second mandatory action that I talked about, where you take 1 gold token and reserve 1 card. When you reserve a card, your opponent can't take it away from you. So if you reserve a jewel card from the board that you know you want, you can keep it aside for safety and buy it at a later time. The only problem is you can hold only up to 3 reserve cards, and you can't actually clear your reserve. So when you reserve a card, you're kind of committing to buying it. You kind of permanently take up a spot in your jewel reserve or jewel card reserve. All information in this game is also public, so you always know what your opponent is doing, except the reserved cards though. The reserved cards are secret, and you can look at them at any time, and remember, you can only have up to 3. So when you reserve a card, you are committing to buying that card. You're kind of permanently taking up a spot in your reserve. You can choose not to buy it. You don't have to buy it, but all of a sudden you've kind of used up 1 slot in your reserve because you can't clear your reserve. Things only get cleared from your reserve when you buy it and it moves into your inventory. Because all information is public, you can plan around what your opponent is doing if you want. You can choose to not pay attention to what they're doing and just still play your own game, but kind of, you still have to make tactical plays because you're both drawing off the same game board. And the way privilege kind of moves around, you kind of have to keep track of that. So again, the game forces you to duel, but it gives you room, it gives you this breathing room to still kind of play your own game. And the last thing, let's talk about cognitive load. I give this a 1.5. It's not very complicated. It's pretty much always you're able to build up momentum as the game progresses, no matter what your strategy is, as long as you have one, of course. Some of the cards have effects like I showed you before, but even they're pretty simple, and they're never so powerful that you'll fall behind or something. So here's one of them. This one lets you steal 1 jewel from the opponent, but it's just 1 jewel. It's not gonna hurt your game too much, but it will throw a curveball. It'll throw a curveball at you, and you have to play around it. Here's another one that lets you take another turn. Again, very powerful if played right, but it's not going to set you back too much if your opponent does that. If you use these special cards right, it could give you that edge to win. Privilege is a big equalizer again. It's kind of like a catch-up mechanic, and using it effectively is the key to winning more. Depending on how much brain space you're willing to commit, you can either just focus on accumulating jewels, so you have lots and lots of buying power as the game progresses, Or you can make deeper plays with privilege, with these powers on the cards and the royals, and with what's in the market right now, because the state of the market can change. Most of the time, the market kind of gets stale because cards don't get purchased that often early in the game, but later in the game, cards are going to get purchased pretty quickly. So the state of the game is going to change very rapidly. So you have to adapt faster and faster as the game progresses. Doing that adaptation, again, is where the cognitive load comes in. You have to do a little bit of work at the start of the game to figure out what kind of strategy you're going to take, which win condition you're going to go for based on the market. And as the game goes on, and what cards you kind of end up accumulating, and the state of the market and what's changing and privilege, you're going to have to adapt again and make different choices and maybe change your path. Maybe you still stick to your victory condition, or maybe you have to pivot. So you can pivot on your own terms, or you might be forced to. You have to be prepared. So yeah, you can come into this game with a strategy, and that might work, but the tactics, the moment-to-moment decisions, and as the game progresses, the ramping up of the game, that's going to have a big role to play. And that's a wrap on Splendor Duel. Thanks for watching. Here's where you go from here. There's a link in the description below to the Board Game Geek listing and a Board Game Oracle listing that'll help you buy the game where you live. Board Game Geek is a fantastic website where you can learn more about board games and find other board games to play. And Board Game Oracle is a website where you can find out where to buy the game and what price the game is currently going for, and wishlist games as well. It's awesome. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more of my content. And if you have any thoughts or questions, I'd love to see you in the comments below. Until next time, bye!